It's time for The Perspective with your hosts, Pastor Mike Sherbino, who's been building churches across Canada for a whole lot of years. Always ready with some good old-fashioned comedy, Mike shares his hard-won Christian wisdom and experience. And we call him marvelous around here, Mitch Hunter, whose own experience as a youth pastor and musician helps him connect with people of all walks of life. The Perspective welcomes a host of thought leaders, seekers, healers, and followers, all to hear God's voice that speaks in all languages. So sit back and relax, and don't worry, this isn't a show about the things you're doing wrong. It's a show about a whole lot of good news. From a mighty church just outside of Toronto, here's Mike and Mitch.
Hey, have you ever found out as you think about your life that it's just so complex? Saying, I don't know how to cope. I don't know how to keep all the little pieces together. Now, Mitch, that's my confession as a guy that's a few years older than you.
Sure.
Is life complex when you're in your 20s?
Well, I would say it is, Mike. And we've got school, we got jobs, we got all of these things. And I like to keep it simple, though. And so one of the ways I do that is I retreat into my basement apartment and we turn on the vinyl because I crave simplicity and all the streaming.
The vinyl, you mean the record?
That's correct. You know,
Okay.
the record player.
I remember those.
You know what, Mike? It takes me back to a simpler time when I was, when I was growing up 30, 40 years ago or so. And
You sound so old and boring, Mitch.
I crave the simple, but life is often complex. That's right.
Life is really complex,
Yeah.
and it's complex for people regardless of the age.
Yeah.
We have an organization that, in baseball terms, they're knocking it out of the park. God is using them to connect with people through their social media platforms, through the rallies, through the events that they do.
Absolutely.
And we're going to talk to them today. John Humphrey is the vice president of I Am Second.
Right on.
And I'm so excited for this conversation. John, welcome to the program today. Thanks for carving time out for us.
Well, thank you for having me on the program, and I look forward to the conversations and speaking about what we do here at I Am Second.
Well, I hope with all the complexities of life, you're going to dumb things down for me. So why don't you start with the name I Am Second? It's a captivating name. What on earth does it mean?
Well, in simplistic terms, it means that we're putting Jesus first in our lives and putting the needs of Him as well as the needs of others ahead of our own needs. But it really came from an inspiration 15 years ago in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, where we asked the question, what if somebody saw an athlete or somebody just saw a team win a game and everybody's chanting, we're number one, we're number one. And then suddenly somebody said, no, I'm not number one. I'm actually number two. There's somebody greater than myself. And that was really the inspiration that came up with the idea. And it's been history since that time.
Well, so John, you mentioned sports teams, and I'm just thinking previously or prior to your work with I Am Second, you actually marketed projects with major sports media teams. Just tell us a little bit about your experience, what that was like.
Well, for a lot of years, I was involved in telling stories of athletes about their accomplishments. Initially, it was in a very secular environment and with a sports agency. And then I formed my own company and really turned to putting the things of sports in a more positive standpoint. It could have been in character development. We did a lot of work with schools and character development programs, but also talking about faith and worked with a lot of different nonprofit ministry organizations to bring those stories out for inspiration, particularly to young people across the country and internationally.
Well, John, you're doing that in an expanded version as well now with I Am Second through some of the films. Tell us about those and who's the target?
Sure. When we started I Am Second years ago, it was really to be bold in the more secular environments with attractive stories that people would want to watch regardless of their faith background. And that's always been our focus, is to create content for an audience of whoever comes and not to be a prerequisite audience of believers. We wanted to hone in on those stories that talked about a transformation where someone came to a point in their life and they needed to make decisions about a direction, and they came into a situation where the prospect of Jesus was introduced into their life. they took that opportunity to follow him as a believer, and then the gradual transformation that took place in their life. Since we started, we've morphed into a lot other types of stories. We like to go ahead and again show how God has worked in someone's life and allowed them to handle the things that the culture brings into all of our paths, and how a faith in Jesus allows us to navigate that walk. But we still love all of those transformational stories and still tell them wherever we can.
Well, John, you've worked with all sorts of people and a lot of names that people would certainly recognize, household names. I think of the Robertsons with Duck Dynasty. Just tell us about some of the people you've been able to work with and what that experience has been like, especially as you hear stories of transformed lives and even these famous names saying, you know what, even though I'm famous, I am second to Christ. Tell us about some people you worked with. What's that like?
Well, I'll first preface it by saying it's not always famous people or people that are known for their story. We do try to balance out all of our stories with good, captivating storytelling of the person next door. It could be the person next door to you, and we really focus in on topics that are common to everyone. That said, there are a number of people that we've worked with over the years who are well known for their faith and maybe for their work. We've leaned into sports. That was a starting point for us. So there's been baseball players and football players and others that we've worked with, hockey players, even swimmers and things like that. The Albert Pulhoses of the world. The Sam Bradfords and the Colt McCoy quarterbacks over the years, Clayton Kershaw of the Dodgers. So that's always been fun. We've also worked with a number of music artists, ranging from country and western to rock, to former rock stars, to Christian artists, and everything from Michael W. Smith over to Brian Welch of Korn. And so it's quite a diverse group of folks, but they all share a commonality in their faith with Christ. And then there have been others that for one reason or another, a moment in time or for their work that they've done, from supermodels all the way over to the TV show hosts like the Gaines family from Fixer Upper, and then the Duck Dynasty folks. As well as people like Carrie Underwood and Mike Fisher, who kind of bring sports and music together. So it's been a lot of fun to meet so many different people and to see the range and spectrum of their stories and their lives, all centered around their faith.
John, let me jump in for a minute, because I love we're using a word over and over in the program today. It's called transformation. And a number of years back, I had a radio program and a TV show that borrowed that name. It's called Transformations. Just before we go to the break, the story of transformation, of what Christ can do in someone's life is huge, the power of a testimony. Can you think of one story that jumps to mind right now that is just, you get thrilled to tell it? And I wonder if you could share that with our viewers just before we go to the break.
Well, the obvious one is the Brian Welch story. It was one of the first that we filmed back when we started. We've actually produced a long-form documentary on it more recently. But the story in a nutshell was he was in a very secular rock band, living that lifestyle. And with drugs, rock and roll, sex, everything that was associated with it. He was addicted to drugs. But he had a daughter, and he was basically thrust into a situation of raising his daughter as a single dad. And this young daughter of his really prompted him to quit the band. And when he was quitting the band at the height of their career, it was also an opportunity for him to quit drugs. And in that whole process, he was also introduced to Jesus. And those three things combined led him to go down a path that for many years was a very difficult path for him to follow, of being clean, raising a daughter, trying to make a living, and navigate this new life in Jesus. And the transformation took a while, and he went through various stages. But when you meet him now, and you compare him to the man that he was, prior to all of that, it is a complete transformation. And the impact that he has had on so many people to bring them into faith in Jesus
Wow.
is just incredible. And even today, even though he has gone back to his bandmates and it plays in the band horn, he's still, after all of those events and concerts that they have, he's out there leading people to Jesus.
Wow. Well, John, that's so exciting, and I'm looking forward to, just after this short break, hearing more stories and more about your work. Folks, at home, stay with us. We got John Humphrey, VP of I Am Second. We got another interview coming right up.
I guess I had a little street cred because guys would look, hey, man, Rudy, how you doing, man? Watch you growing up. And then we'd talk about sports, but then we'd get into life. And the more I talked, I just loved them. They challenged me, and that became really important to me, and I love it. How do you talk about your faith so you're not boring, but you're real?
Hey, we're back with John Humphrey, the Vice President of I Am Second. Love that name. John, in this whole world of what you're doing in trying to integrate faith into the marketplace, how do you lead your team through the complexities that are out there? And a lot of the complexities are saying, the Judeo-Christian values, they're out to lunch. There's issues on sexuality, what is right and wrong and what is acceptable, and that we're Victorian. There's the whole thing of abortion, euthanasia. The list is endless. How do you navigate it? How do you figure it out?
Well, I think we've taken the position that we're not as a ministry, we're not in an argumentative type of position. We aren't going to go toe to toe arguing facts or somebody's truth when we have a truth that we're supposed to follow. And what we want to do is to present that truth in a way that communicates the real breadth of Jesus's love. And that's what we're all about. So we lean into telling and showing how Jesus and following Jesus is an antidote to the ills that they're experiencing in their life or their desires that they are experiencing in their life. And so we just lean into those positive experiences.
Yeah, right on. Well, John, I love that saying. We're not here to take an argumentative approach or try to fix the way that somebody thinks, but we want to share the truth of Jesus. And so on that note, how do you find that your films are being received in the general public?
Well, generally speaking, we try to go ahead and present them in a way that is equal to anything else that they're going to see anywhere else in terms of quality, in terms of storytelling. So when people watch it, they don't feel that they're being preached to. These are interviews, first-person narratives that come through. That's their truth that they've experienced. It's the truth that they've experienced. It's their experience. And they will go ahead and tell the story a whole lot better than I can or someone else can. So we go ahead and we lean into that as best we can. And then we let the Holy Spirit go ahead and work with it in each person's life. What we found, the response has been equal from non-believers and believers when they watch the films, and we just take it from there.
Well, that's exciting. And looking at as you've just said, the quality, the storytelling of the films, and we were just watching a little clip a moment ago, and just even the camera work, the cuts, it was very well done. It's professional. And so you're communicating clearly with people in a way they understand. And I just love that. And so often, sometimes with Christian media, it can feel, oh, this is under budget. Oh, it's just Christian media. It's not going to be as good. So props to you for pushing against that. I wonder, do you ever receive pushback for making the kind of videos that you make?
Not necessarily. No, we don't receive pushback because, again, we're not trying to put words in anyone's mouth. This is their stories. We just help them to tell it as best they can and as concise as they can. And through that, they can share that wherever they can. We can share it wherever it may go. And again, let the Holy Spirit direct who it's going to see, who's going to see it.
Hey, I'd love to hear just some of your thoughts because you've done some work with Chip and Joanna Gaines, the stars of Fixer Upper. Talk to us a little bit about that. And then also Carrie Underwood and Mike Fisher, and who's a good Canadian who doesn't live too far from where we're recording today, or at least he used to live not too far.
Yeah, I will say that there's different ways for us to be involved in doing a film with them. Sometimes people come to us, sometimes we go to them, sometimes mutual people put us together. I think the common factor in those names that you mentioned there, as well as others, is because of our commitment to excellence and because we are working collaboratively with those that we're filming. They see us as a safe space, that we're not going to misrepresent what they said. And we're going to be able to allow them to use that for ministry purposes, not for promoting ourselves, not for promoting other people, but for ministry purposes that they can be a part of.
Mm. Well, John, I've got this in front of me. I Am Second Canada, and I'm excited, and I could Google that or do whatever, and folks at home could Google that, but I want to hear it from you. What is I Am Second Canada? How can we follow with some of the videos that you guys are making?
Well, if you go to I Am Second Canada, that will take you to certain places in Facebook and social media and other places like that. IamSecond.com, the website, is the platform that I'm Second Canada uses to showcase our films and other tools. But I think that the biggest thing in I'm Second Canada, just like we have here in the States, is that there's follow-up that happens both through the website, but beyond that, we have coaches that are available that can help take people through a discipleship process. And then there's interaction that can happen even at the church setting, so that I'm Second Canada will be able to work with churches all over the country and helping teach people how to share the gospel, how to evangelize in their own backyard, give them opportunities to do that, as well as discipling people along that pathway.
It's exciting to hear all those initiatives because, John, one of the things that I am passionate about, I know Mitch is as well, and many others, but we want to say, how do we push back against the secular agenda that has infiltrated our country and also our friends to the south of us, but selfishly for our country? And so thank you for the work you've been doing and continue to do with I Am Second. And I'm looking forward to how it's going to assist us here in Canada, even in greater measure. So John, thank you for coming on the program. Love to talk to you again in the near future to hear more about what is happening with I Am Second.
Well, it's our pleasure. Thank you.
Well, folks, stay with us. We got more coming on the program today. You're watching The Perspective.
He turned around and grabbed me. There was intense pain in my chest. He began to yank my hair, took my head and started shoving me into the back of his car with all of his power. I knew I had no choice but to fight.
Well, we're glad you're with us today. And as we've been unpacking what John Humphrey's talking about, Mitch, first of all, the name I Am Second.
Right.
I really gravitate to that name. It's very countercultural.
Absolutely.
And maybe people are listening right now and they're saying, I'm not sure I really get it. Why would I want to be second when I surely should be first? What do you think about that?
Well, Mike, I think we see it all the time. People saying, I am first. And when I was at university, I saw that all the time. What mattered was how smart I am and how good of a job I do and what my achievements are and what my paper says. But we realize that when I go home at the end of the day, even after having all those papers, when I ask myself, do I truly have peace putting myself first? And do I truly have contentment and satisfaction when I am the greatest good in my life? I believe the answer is no. And so I have found for myself, when I am second to Christ, then I find peace and contentment that only He can provide.
Well, and it's very freeing because when you say I'm second to Jesus, it means that He is your leader and your Lord. And that is very empowering because then Jesus says we can do all things through Him who gives us the strength. And so as we're chatting with you today, could it be that you need to rethink the way that you look at life? Is it all about you and what you feel you need to do? Because, Mitch, Jesus said that greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. And he says, you are my friends if you do whatever I tell you to do. So here's Jesus, who is the leader, and yet he laid down his life. That is a powerful statement.
Well, and Mike, it's powerful when we move from saying, I'm going to make my own good in life and say, I'm going to choose what's good for me. I'm going to say school is the best, money is the best, relationships, food, whatever the case may be. That's the end good, but it never satisfies. But Jesus says, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. And Jesus offers us an objective life outside of ourselves. So we ask, is the gospel still relevant? Can people still be transformed today? Why should I be second? It's because of Jesus.
And in the light of the program today, when we become second, Jesus is first. And I'm going to tell you, you can discover the purpose for which you and I were created.
Absolutely.
Hang with us. We're going to be right back. As I reflect on the conversation I just had with Mitch, as I'm thinking about the whole ministry of I Am Second and the many other organizations that we've profiled on this show, the people that we've interviewed, I want you to understand with me that there is a whole audience that we're missing. And that's the people who only live stream, who go to a YouTube channel. I want to take what we have been producing on The Perspective to those people. 40% of Canadians actually fall into that category. I need your help to do it. It's about $100,000. And if you'd like to go to our website, maybe be a monthly partner, maybe someone who could give a gift, it will help me make a difference in the lives of people. And together we're partnering for the kingdom of Jesus Christ. Thanks for thinking about us. Go to theperspective.tv and make a donation today.
Have you really wondered if what you put your faith in, you can actually believe, you can actually trust? You know, we're here, and in the beauty that's all around us, there is still the lurking question, can God be trusted? Is he real? And how can I know for sure that his joy can be a reality in my life? Hey, we've been studying from the book of Philippians, and I want to open it up again to you today. This little book on joy. Listen to the words. Paul writes, he's a servant of Jesus Christ, and he writes to the saints in Christ Jesus. Kind of equal terms, my goodness. You're sitting beside a saint if they love Jesus. Paul says, I'm a servant. That's kind of interesting because he's not caught up in reputation. I like the real thing, but I still come back to the question, can I trust God? So far, it's so good, but then I go on to what Paul says, and he says, every day, he said, you need to discover joy's friends. I talked about them yesterday, grace and peace. We need God's grace for the moment so that we can enter into his peace. And I've said many times, God, I need your grace because I need peace that passes all understanding. But is it just a head game? Or how do I know that God is really there, that he is with me? Well, over and over again, there's an invitation that comes to us that we're to pray, that we're to call out to God. Listen to what Paul says. He writes to the church and he said, I thank my God in all my remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine for you, always making my prayer with joy. He writes with joy, but he says, I'm praying for you guys all the time. That is simply fantastic. He's saying, I can trust in God. I know that he hears my prayer. I know the reality of who he is. And so here we go, because he say, as we think about this, he says, you have a partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. What a powerful statement. Let's think about it for a moment. Paul talks about praying for the church. The inference is that God has heard his prayer. he prays with joy because why? There's a confidence that God is hearing his prayer. Now, he's not like a lot of sports fans who say, hey, I'm praying that, my team wins the game. Some of us are Canadians, obviously, and we're just wishing the Canadian team could win the Stanley Cup again or something like that. But he is still saying, I am praying, and I pray with joy because God is working out his plan in our life. Throughout the scriptures, we see examples of people who invested in a time of prayer. I want to encourage you to have that time of prayer as well, because Paul gives us so many examples. But let's go to the Old Testament, the example of the apostle of Daniel. It says, Daniel got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. He did that 3 times a day. Daniel is technically a prisoner in the country of where Nebuchadnezzar was king. And it was a brutal regime, but he trusted God. And daily he made it his ritual to spend time with God. And that ritual turned into a relationship because he could listen for God's voice. He could hear God's voice. Paul would actually write later on in this book of joy, he said, don't be anxious about anything, but in everything with prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God that passes all understanding will guard your hearts and mind. Can I just take the last couple minutes and help you to think about what it means to have a time of prayer? To say, daily, I'm going to carve out 10 minutes a day just to be quiet. What do? Well, start by thanking God for someone or something. Thank him, choose joy. And saying, Lord, this is maybe a difficult day, but I'm going to believe that you are with me, that you are helping me. Some of you remember me telling the story that, last year I spent a long time in hospital. And there were days when I was just overwhelmed. And I discovered there was a secret. I had a choice I could make to either give thanks, and sometimes I had to look all over and say, God, what am I thankful for today? Maybe it was the nursing staff. Maybe it was the doctors caring for me. Maybe the fact that I eventually got moved out of a ward room into a better room, but I tried to find things to be thankful for. And that changed my focus. Because as you start to give thanks to God, as you start to practice and choose joy, it lifts your spirit. Because you see, the prayer of joy is really the prayer of faith. Were the Philippians perfect? Not by a long shot. But Paul said, I give thanks to God every time I pray for you, because he was confident that God was doing something special in their life. And today, start to pray. Start to invite Jesus into the midst of your life. Let him be the center. It will make the difference to whether you live in joy or you know what the opposite is. Don't be there. Walk and live in joy.